you doing, everybody? Welcome to Scott Fox After 9. It is a very frigid, cold day here in southern Ontario, going down to the mid-20s overnight tonight. It is just not great out there. And coming up in the pod today, I'm going to cover a whole wide variety of different things. I've got stories on traffic. The latest numbers are out on how much time we're spending sitting in gridlock. So I've got that. You're going to hear from that son of a bitch, Governor of the Bank of Canada, Tiff Macklem. Yesterday, he decided to leave interest rates unchanged. He figures Canadians don't need a break on their interest rates. And you're also going to hear from the federal NDP party today. Yesterday, they did a media availability. We'll find out what's going on with the Orange Party here in Canada. And I've also got some of the province's premiers that are all in Ottawa today for a meeting with the Prime Minister. Right now, the federal government is going to try and facilitate conversations between the premiers to try and tear down some of the inter-provincial trade barriers. And we now know that if we could actually take down those inter-provincial trade barriers, which are still very much in effect, by the way, it would be a massive boost to Canada's GDP. But these premiers can't figure it out. We've got Ontario threatening to ban Manitoba whiskey from Ontario liquor stores. We've got Quebec and British Columbia that want to block Alberta pipelines. And there's a whole bunch of drama between the provinces where we just haven't figured it out yet. And so the Prime Minister is going to try and play moderator and get these premiers all singing from the same songbook, is a line that Doug Ford would probably use on this topic. But we do have to get rid of those interprovincial trade barriers. Meetings are happening today in Ottawa. You're going to get bombarded with audio and video from those meetings on your social media feed. So I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time on that. But can we please figure this out? I mean, come on. You know, we've got all these interprovincial trade barriers, which we were assured would be taken down, but they are still very much in effect. The provinces have to work out deals with each other. They can't just say, we're just going to tear them all down. I mean, I don't know why they can't do that. I thought the Team Canada approach was a collaborative one where we could say, hey, there's no more barriers to trade within provinces. But they haven't been able to do that yet. So I hope they're successful because this just needs to get done. And frankly, every day they delay, more job losses. Before I go any further on the pod, can I just say to the amazing people, the auto workers in Ontario, the folks that are losing their job at General Motors and the Oshawa Assembly Plant, we now know it's going to be about 1,200 people who are doing their final day of work today or tomorrow, and then they're done. The entire third shift gone. 1,200 jobs out. And you know what? It's amazing because at any other time, if there were substantial job losses, this would be headline news. And we're not really talking too much about it. But the consequences of these job losses, I just feel so bad for these people. Let me give you a partial list. So GM letting go of 1,200 people. They are done as of tomorrow. Public Service and Procurement Canada, 761 layoff notices. StatsCan, 850 positions cut. The Canada Revenue Agency, 3,000 job losses since 2024, but that continues on, plus 280 additional confirmed layoffs. TELUS, 700 voluntary severance packages offered to staff early this year. Algonquin College, 37. Autodesk, 1,350 global job cuts, also affecting their Canadian operations. I just don't have the specific Canadian number, but 1,350 more jobs gone. Starbucks, letting go of 1,100 corporate positions. Mohawk College, 91 full-time and 100 part-time jobs gone. Cisco, 4,000 global job cuts, a lot of them in Canada. Mozilla, 60 jobs gone. Instacart, 250 jobs gone. Snap, 500 jobs cut. Zoom, 150 job cuts. Canada Goose, 800 jobs cut. Dell, 6,000 jobs cut globally. A lot of those are in Canada. And I could go on and on and on. There are so many examples of people losing their jobs, and I don't understand why this isn't considered a crisis. Maybe it's the job cuts at StatsCan. I don't know what the next jobs numbers are going to look like, but frankly, I think when we see the cuts for January, Our unemployment number has got to shoot way up, especially with the seasonal positions that were people that were hired for the holidays. Those also ended. So I don't see a whole lot of good news on the job front coming anytime soon. And that really is a tragedy. I mean, anybody who loses their job, I feel for them. But when it's this many people all at once, that's got to put an incredible strain on the EI system and our social safety net. Real sad times here in Canada. I was hoping yesterday that the Bank of Canada would realize a lot of people are losing their jobs and affordability is a major issue. I thought the Bank of Canada would give us a little bit of relief. Unfortunately, they decided, nope, Canada's good. The middle class is fine. No interest rate cut. Here is that son of a bitch, Tiff Macklem from the Bank of Canada and his announcement yesterday.
Today, Governing Council maintained our policy interest rate at 2.25%. Our forecast for economic growth and inflation in Canada has not changed significantly since our October projection. As the Canadian economy continues to adjust to U.S. trade restrictions, we expect the economy to grow modestly and inflation to stay close to our 2% target. However, uncertainty around our forecast is heightened. The range of possible outcomes is wider than usual. U.S. trade policy remains unpredictable, and geopolitical risks are elevated. Our monetary policy decisions are focused on keeping inflation close to the 2% target while helping the economy through this period of structural change. Governing Council judges the current policy rate remains appropriate, conditional on the economy evolving broadly in line with the outlook we published today. With heightened uncertainty, we are monitoring risks closely. If the outlook changes, we are prepared to respond.
Okay, so a cautious approach being announced here by the Bank of Canada. They're going to go cautious. They don't want to give people back their money. They want to just stay the course and leave them paying higher interest rates than they need to, even though there's a major affordability crisis and record numbers of jobs being lost right now. I personally disagree with the position of the Bank of Canada. They say their only job is to control inflation, and they say the only way they can do it is to keep interest rates high or to raise interest rates. I still disagree with that. I think that the Bank of Canada cutting interest rates and the federal government cutting taxes are the two single biggest things that could pull Canada out of the tailspin that it's in right now when it comes to the economy. You heard me talking about the job losses. A lot of that is because costs are high for businesses as well. Interest rates and taxes play a huge role in that. Now, I do want to spend a little bit of time today with the governor of the Bank of Canada because he did have some interesting things to say about the way the bank sees the Canadian economy progressing. Let's listen a little bit more, and then I'm going to do just a little bit of the Q&A with reporters.
So let me expand on what we've seen in the economy since October and what we see ahead. Tariffs and uncertainty continue to disrupt the Canadian economy. After a strong third quarter, economic growth likely stalled in the fourth quarter. Exports continue to be buffeted by U.S. tariffs, while domestic demand appears to be picking up. Household spending is expected to continue growing moderately, supported by past cuts in interest rates and rising disposable incomes. U.S. tariffs and related uncertainty have held back business investment, but we expect some modest strengthening in investment as businesses adjust to the new trade environment and governments increase infrastructure spending.
Just to point out here, the governor there saying that he basically thinks the economy came to a halt in the fourth quarter of 2025. He also, for some bizarre reason, seems to be taking a little bit of credit for his past interest rate cuts, even though they're not as low as I think they should be. He's taking credit for cutting them down to where they are. Still much higher than they were when he said they wouldn't go up, but they are down from the height. He's taking credit for that, saying that household spending is going to continue to increase because people have more disposable income. I respectfully, maybe not even respectfully, I disagree with Tiff Macklem on that one. I'm sorry, but it seems like everybody, even those who do have just a little bit of extra money every month, they're being really cautious with it. I don't see the economy the way Tiff Macklem sees it. I think especially middle-class families that are struggling to get by are just getting by, if they're getting by at all. A lot of people are paying off one credit card with another credit card because there's just no extra money. What the government isn't taking, the Bank of Canada is. I disagree with the governor's assessment of where things are at right now. Maybe in certain situations or certain demographics, I'm sure the boomers are doing just fine. There's a heck of a lot of Gen Z and younger millennials that might have a little bit of disposable income right now, but that's because they can't afford a home, so they're living in their parents' basement. When you don't have to pay rent or a mortgage at all, yeah, sure, you've got a lot of extra money. But homeowners, middle-class ones, they're really struggling, and I have no one else to blame but the federal government's taxes and the Bank of Canada itself. In fact, a major driver of inflation when it comes to housing is interest rates itself.
The impact of U.S. tariffs can also be seen in the labor market. Employment weakened in the first half of 2025 as sectors hit hard by U.S. tariffs cut production and jobs. In recent months, overall employment has risen, led by hiring in services like healthcare. At the same time, slowing population growth is reducing the number of new entrants into the labor market. Still, the unemployment rate remains high at 6.8%. Youth unemployment is particularly elevated, and relatively few businesses say they plan to hire more workers in coming months. Overall, economic growth is expected to pick up gradually. The Bank of Canada projects annual average GDP growth of 1.1% in 2026 and 1.5% in 2027, broadly in line with our October projection. Turning to inflation, it averaged 2.1% last year and has now been within the 1% to 3% band for 2 years. If we focus on recent movements, CPI inflation rose to 2.4% in December, boosted by base year effects linked to last year's GST HST holiday.
That was great. If we could get that back, that would actually help people a lot. That GST holiday doesn't get enough credit. I think because it was a Justin Trudeau idea. I think by and large, people really enjoyed that GST holiday, particularly the fact that there was no tax on food. That includes restaurants and delivery. I thought that was great. And no doubt that did help the economy somewhat, particularly in that restaurant industry. The governor of the Bank of Canada here, the son of a bitch, Tiff Macklem, he's really walking a fine line right now. You know, I know he wants to keep bringing in the kind of money he's bringing in for bankers with these elevated interest rates. I just don't see this as being particularly smart. When so many people are struggling and so many businesses are laying people off, again, refer back to the beginning of this pod. I ran down the amount of jobs that are lost, and that was just top line, a few of them that I could find really quickly. When we drill down and get into specific cities and smaller industries, there are a lot of people losing their job, and I don't know what the heck they're going to do unless the Bank of Canada here is preparing for a wave of foreclosures, but it doesn't sound like they are. One other thing I want to point out here is the governor talked about employment numbers, and he is right. There aren't many companies that say they plan to hire. Obviously terrible news for people who are losing their job right now. I feel like those unemployment numbers are actually a lot higher than StatsCan cares to admit. StatsCan puts out numbers that the government uses to brag in the House of Commons and that the Bank of Canada uses to not lower our interest rates. But what if the numbers from StatsCan are not accurate? Then all of this is based on a false premise. And to be honest with you, I'm very skeptical. I think there should be a deep audit at StatsCan and at the Bank of Canada because I really don't think we're getting the best, most sound financial advice. That is my personal opinion. I think our monetary policy is way, way off base. And I think that, again, the smartest thing the Bank of Canada could do in the name of trying to spur our economy to grow a little bit is cut interest rates, give people back a little bit more of their money. The best way to do that is to not take it in the first place. I said that about the federal government the other day, and I'm saying it about the Bank of Canada now. Don't take as much of our money. Let us keep just a little bit more of what we earn. Now I want to go to a little bit of the Q&A with reporters, and then I'm going to wrap up this portion of the pod on interest rates. Here is the governor of the Bank of Canada once again.
Governor, is the Bank of Canada saying that the outcome of the USMCA negotiations is going to dictate the next move in interest rates?
Paul, what we are saying is that uncertainty around our forecast is unusually high. There are a number of risks and uncertainties. Geopolitical risks, geopolitical uncertainties have increased. They're heightened. U.S. trade policy remains highly unpredictable. And for Canada, yes, CUSMA, what happens, what the outcome is of the review of CUSMA is an important risk to our projection. I mean, what we have built into our projection is that tariffs that are currently in place remain in place. So what that means is that the tariffs on the hard-hit sector stay, the CUSMA exemptions for everything else remain in place. That could change with the review. The other thing we have in our projection is, the uncertainty is already having an impact on the economy. That's built into our projection. We have that gradually diminishing over time. But yes, CUSMA is under review, and the outcome of that, there's obvious risks to the projection. The outcome may not be no change. And we highlighted that in the press release, and in the back of the monetary policy report, we go through a number of possible outcomes for CUSMA. I would stress that we've done a number of scenarios. They've been in our monetary policy report. We've published them in speeches as well, with a whole range of different configurations of U.S. tariffs. We've found those useful in our decision making, and I think it's never easy to manage uncertainty, but I think they do help us think through the channels and some quantification of the impacts of different CUSMA outcomes.
Okay, but man, he is boring. Wow. I'm not a huge fan of Tiff Macklem. Maybe I should declare that bias. I don't agree with our monetary policy. I don't even agree with the central bank anymore. I think what they've done to people is just shameful. Told them interest rates will remain low for the foreseeable future. Then they jacked up interest rates at astronomical speed. They left them there much longer than they needed to, and now they throw their hands in the air and pretend, wow, I don't know what's going on. There's so much uncertainty. How many times did he say uncertainty just in that clip? So much uncertainty. We wouldn't have as much uncertainty if people had more money in their pockets. But Tiff doesn't deal with the middle class economy. He deals with this sort of stuff. He likes things like the CPI and the GDP and all this sort of thing. Manufacturing outputs, housing starts. At the end of the day, that doesn't affect regular people like you and me. We want to talk about how much money we have coming in and what our expenses are. And the biggest expenses right now are housing, food, and the biggest one is taxes. There are ways that we could make life a lot more affordable for people right now. It just seems like the people in charge aren't all that interested in doing it. Now, one more thing on these interest rates is I do like it. I find it refreshing that the Bank of Canada just acknowledged that they do forecasting or modeling for different scenarios, i.e., how will things look if the tariffs stay on? How will things look if we don't get a renegotiated USMCA? You know what I'd like to know? What would things look like if we got a deal with the Americans that had no tariffs? And that's certainly on the table. That is a distinct possibility that if we can work it out with the Americans, just like Kevin O'Leary in yesterday's episode of Scott Fox After 9 suggested, if we could get to a tightly integrated economy between Canada and the U.S., if we could get to a place where we're essentially one functioning unit, although two sovereign countries, what would that look like? Then how much could we drop interest rates if we were in that scenario and we had guaranteed certainty? What would it look like if we just made up with the Americans and solved the problem like they want to do, but we're avoiding? What would that look like? And I have a feeling there's a reason that he's not saying what that model looks like, because that model looks like prosperity. And right now it's a lot of doom and gloom. The governor doesn't want to do anything that would make the Americans or a deal with the Americans look attractive to people. I mean, I can take a look at those numbers. You can put it into ChatGPT or whatever AI program you use. Ask it, how good could things be if we had an integrated economy? If we were, to use Doug Ford's term, the Am-Can fortress? What would that look like for our economy? And how much more money and disposable income would the middle class have then? Interesting, he laid out all of the worst case scenarios, the best case scenario, if we got to deal with the Americans. He didn't really touch on that. And I think that that's kind of telling, to be honest with you. I think that that's just part of the narrative that we just cannot work with the Americans. It's got to be a different way. So, hey, I mean, feel however you want to feel about it. I'm not a fan of Tiff Macklem or the Bank of Canada, and I disagree greatly with the way that they are running our monetary policy. To me, the single best stimulus for this country and our economy overall would be to put more money back in people's pockets. It's a simple thing. Let's go to Ottawa, not to talk about the premiers or the prime minister or anything like that. One of the parties that we haven't heard a lot from lately is the federal New Democrats. They got completely wiped out in the last election because Jagmeet Singh pissed everybody off by keeping Justin Trudeau in power way longer than Trudeau should have been in power. Don Davies is the interim leader because they still haven't found a full-time leader. Yesterday, he called a news conference and he was calling for an emergency debate on Donald Trump's threats to Canada. I'm not 100% sure that the NDP is reading the room right at the moment, but in fairness, I mean, I cover the Liberals a lot. I cover the Conservatives a lot. Let's give some airtime here, or pod time, to the federal NDP. Here is interim leader Don Davies.
On the recent deeply concerning statements and actions by the Trump administration that have grave implications for the sovereignty and security of Canada. On January 3rd, President Trump ordered American forces to disregard international law and core principles of national sovereignty by attacking Venezuela, a United Nations member state. Following this act, President Trump stated that the U.S. would, quote, run the country, end quote, and specifically referenced Venezuela's oil reserves as a prime motivation for this assault. This aggression was followed by President Trump's announcement of the establishment of a Dunro Doctrine, considering the entire Western Hemisphere to be within the sole hegemonic control of the United States. President Trump and senior U.S. administration officials then expressed their intent to seize Greenland, an internationally recognized territory of Denmark, another UN member state, and importantly, NATO member. They justified this aggression by referencing Greenland's Arctic proximity, mineral reserves, and inadequate defense capacity. All of these actions and words have direct application to Canada. Indeed, they were graphically depicted in a photo from the Oval Office itself, superimposing the U.S. flag over a map of Canada. It is clear that Canada faces serious economic, political, and military threats from the Trump administration. These actions and statements constitute a new and troubling U.S. approach to security and constitute non-adherence to international norms.
Let me just point out, I know there's some people who are probably thinking, yeah, he's absolutely right. And there's others who are thinking, what an idiot. I understand that, and I know where that's coming from. Here's the thing. What he said there isn't necessarily wrong. Yes, the U.S. did go and basically invade Venezuela. Now, they did it to get rid of a dictator, Maduro. And the Venezuelan people were quite happy and appreciative that the U.S. did that. Now, the NDP here realizes what's going on. They're starting to connect the dots on what Donald Trump is doing. And I'm just giving you the other side of it because that was that was the NDP's read on what's happening. And again, factually, it's not necessarily wrong, but there's a lot of context missing. I think we all agree. In fact, NATO's Secretary General has even stated there are serious threats in the Arctic. He's not opposed to the U.S. having a military presence in Greenland. He tried to facilitate the talks with Denmark so the U.S. could do it. There's a threat to the Arctic, and we're not capable of defending it. The U.S. wants to be able to defend it because they want fortress Western Hemisphere. They would like Canada to be in on it. Don Davies here suggesting that the Americans, or maybe he's about to suggest that the Americans are going to attack Canada and they're attacking our sovereignty. I really don't think they are. The way I read this situation is it's simple. This is a negotiation, hardball tactics. But at the end of the day, we're still friends, neighbors, and allies. They're just trying to get us to make a deal and buy into this version of the New World Order. And the New World Order is simple. It's very simple. Certain superpowers are going to control certain areas. The Chinese are going to control their area. The Russians are going to control Russia and parts of Western Europe. North America is going to be controlled by the Americans. Maybe that was a bit of a rant. Maybe that was a little too far in depth on this one. I was just trying to provide a little bit of context to what Don Davies is suggesting here, because the way he's making it sound is an invasion by the Americans is imminent. They're going to come over the poles and come right at us. They're going to send a boat through Lake Ontario and start bombing. It's going to be nothing like that. We're in a negotiation right now, and that's okay. It's been a lot of drawn out back and forth drama day to day. But the Americans are not invading us. They just want to work with us. And, well, it's debatable how cooperative we're being. But in fairness, though, their approach has been really aggressive, far more aggressive than most people would like to see. It doesn't seem like a peaceful, let's sit down and talk it out. It seems much more like you're going to agree to it or you're screwed, that sort of thing. So I understand the approach. I'm trying to acknowledge and validate all viewpoints here. I just think that the leader of the NDP here, Don Davies, I don't know if he's 100% on solid ground to suggest that we're at an imminent threat from the Americans.
They follow repeated and continuing threats made to Canada since Donald Trump became president. Taken together, these developments have urgent, pressing, and profound implications for Canadian security and sovereignty. Many observers from across the political spectrum have publicly identified Canada's vulnerability as a result. Voices as diverse as Jason Kenney and Bob Rae. Former Communications Security Establishment official Artur Wilczynski. Academics like Thomas Homer Dixon and artists like Neil Young. Having just returned
you know what? Just cut it off. Listen, if you want to see all of his remarks, feel free. Me personally, my political views are not in the slightest bit influenced by how Neil Young feels. I don't even really care what Jason Kenney thinks, to be perfectly honest with you. It doesn't matter to me. Just assessing the actual situation, it is what it is. I don't think that... Hey, listen, if he truly feels like we're at threat here because of the situation in Venezuela and Greenland... okay, I mean, sure. I understand why you might see it that way. I just think that that's an extreme take on the situation we're in. Let's just go to a little bit of the Q&A with reporters.
Oui, bonjour. Hello, Mr. Davies. I wanted to ask you, sorry to go back a little bit in time, to the statement you made in the name of the NDP when Canada reached an agreement with China. I was a little bit surprised that the NDP was was happy about that agreement, considering the consideration for human rights or forced labor in China. So I just wanted to know a little bit more about the thinking behind that position.
Well, I think first and foremost, the behavior of the Trump administration has made it clear that Canada has to pursue other markets for our goods and services, that the United States is no longer the reliable partner that it once was. In fact, far from that, they are now threatening us in many ways and very openly talk about doing harm to the Canadian economy. So part of that diversification, I think, is for Canada to reach out to every other country in the world and to try to seek markets for our goods and services. We all know that Canadian farmers were suffering from the tariffs that had been put on us by China. And I thought that it was a limited step forward for Canada to work with the Chinese government to thaw some of those tariffs. And I think the result is going to be good for Canada's forestry workers, good for Canada's fishers, good for Canada's farmers, and potentially good for Canada's consumers as well. So those concerns that you raise are very real. They're very valid. NDP has always believed in a values-based approach to foreign policy, and things like human rights should always be top of mind. But our economic security, I think, is also very important at this point, and I think it was a measured small step forward that is good for the Canadian economy and frankly sends a message to Donald Trump that Canada has other markets besides the United States.
The problem is we don't have any way to get our product to those markets, and that's something that the NDP doesn't really like to talk about. In fact, really nobody on the left likes to talk about that, but it still is the elephant in the room. We can find all the trading partners we want, but if we sell them something, we have to get it to them. And frankly, I haven't seen a good plan on how we're going to do that yet. We need pipelines. And there's a lot of folks in Canada, leaders in Canada, that want to oppose building another pipeline. And I don't understand that. The NDP there is saying, yeah, sure, we still believe in human rights, but we need to worry about our economic security. Okay, but I mean, we can still walk and chew gum at the same time. There's other countries besides China. You know what? It's his view. I understand it. I'm glad I put it on the pod so you could hear a bit of the view from the left, but I still need to hear a credible plan. You know, again, do all the deals you want with whoever you want, but if there's no way to get the product to them, then this is a pretty big problem. While I'm playing voices on the pod that you don't often hear because the vast majority of the media oxygen is sucked up by the Liberals and the Conservatives, I think it's fair at this moment to hear a little bit from the leader of the Federal Green Party, Elizabeth May. Yesterday, she got an opportunity to ask a question during question period in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And my questions to the Honourable President of the Treasury Board. With massive cuts being made to our civil service, how can the government justify threats to public health and safety as outlined today by the Public Service Alliance of Canada? Specifically in my community, we're very concerned as across a number of departments, believe it or not, workers involved in marine emergency response to oil spills have all been laid off. How does the government justify this?
The Honourable...
It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I mean, yikes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And my questions to the Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Anyway, that was the question that got asked by the leader of the Federal Green Party, Elizabeth May. I don't even think I need to do any question period from yesterday. Like I said, when I was doing the question period audio yesterday, first time we'd had a question period since December, and I didn't miss it. It's a lot of hyperbole. It's a lot of grandstanding. It's a lot of trying to get you with weird moments that they can put on social media, but it isn't all that substantive. It doesn't seem like a lot of questions get answered, and that's really frustrating to me, and I think to a lot of Canadians. Anybody who watches Question Period probably has realized by now it's Question Period for a reason, because there's not a lot of answers. One of the mini controversies that we've been dealing with for the last number of days is the he said about what he said between Donald Trump and Mark Carney. Donald Trump has not commented on this. However, when he did a phone call with Prime Minister Carney just the other day, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent was in the Oval Office. And he said that he overheard Mark Carney aggressively trying to walk back some of the comments that the Prime Minister made in Davos. Well, it's weird that we had to find out about that from American media and that there was no readout from the Prime Minister's office. People have been very critical of that because it's not transparent in any way. Well, we got a little clarification. The Prime Minister said he didn't walk it back. He said he stands by what he said in Davos. Okay, well, Scott Bessent was doing a media availability yesterday. He was on CNBC. They asked him about his comments about what Mark Carney allegedly said to Donald Trump when they were on that phone call the other day.
What about Canada? We've got a bit of a rift there lately, and there's different accounts between you and Prime Minister Mark Carney about that call this week post-Davos with President Trump. He says that he dug in and reinforced the message. You said that he walked it back.
I was on the call. Prime Minister Carney, in my investment career, I've seen what happens when a technocrat tries to pivot and become a politician. Never really works out well. So I would just encourage Prime Minister Carney to do what he thinks is best for the Canadian people, not his own virtue signaling, because we do have a USMCA negotiation coming up, and he rose to power on an anti-American, anti-Trump message, and that's not a great place to be when you're negotiating with an economy that is multiple larger than you are and your biggest trading partner. In the end, I think we will end up in a good place. It may not be a straight line.
Are you saying that they will face consequences in these trade negotiations, reopening the USMCA?
I am saying that I would not pick a fight going into USMCA to score some cheap political points. Either you are working for your own political career or you're working for the Canadian people.
Hey, listen, we have no way of knowing unless the White House releases the actual transcript from that call. But either way, Secretary Bessent seems pretty convinced that that's the way it went down. And Prime Minister Carney says he stands by what he said. I think we need a readout from the Prime Minister's office then. I think that's only fair. In fact, a question got asked about that just yesterday in the House of Commons. I want to play for you a little bit of a question from a member of Parliament that I like a lot. He is certainly, if there is to be a Conservative government in Canada, this will most likely be our new Foreign Affairs Minister. He is the Member of Parliament for Wellington, Halton Hills, Michael Chong.
Well, I think the Prime Minister owes Canadians an explanation as to what is going on in the Canada-U.S. relationship. He owes Canadians an explanation to clarify what happened in his most recent conversation with President Trump. Millions of Canadians are worried about our relationship. Past prime ministers have traditionally issued statements or readouts about conversations they have with other world leaders. It's an effort to keep Canadians informed about our foreign relations. This Prime Minister has not done this for the most recent conversation.
Mr. Chong is actually quite right. This is something that all past prime ministers have done, and it's surprising that the current prime minister doesn't want to do that. I'm not exactly sure why. Transparency is certainly an issue, or becoming one, with the federal government right now, and I'll tell you why. They've just given themselves the power to delete their emails and delete their text messages. They can deem anything no longer of business relevance for Canada, and after a month, delete it. For comparison, every single phone call, text message that the President of the United States gets is archived forever. It's considered property of the government. We're deleting stuff after between 15 and 30 days in some cases. So if things are happening with our government, you'd like to think that in the future, if there's ever an inquiry or a review or something like that, we can refer to the receipts. They're deleting them. And that's not very transparent. I think just about everybody listening would agree. That would never happen in the business world unless something illegal is going on or something under the table is going on. And I don't know why government should do it either. When they're working for us, that sort of stuff, when they're conducting business on behalf of the Canadian people, that should be property of the Canadian people. And again, they get paid very well to do this job. I'm really not sure why they can give themselves power to delete stuff after 30 days if they deem that it's no longer of business relevance for the country. Very, very strange stuff. And if you want to know more about that, feel free to Google it. That's an interesting one that I think Canadians should be paying attention to. And I'm really surprised there hasn't been a louder outcry about that because it is not normal. Speaking of Michael Chong, he did ask a question yesterday about the Foreign Interference Registry. The Foreign Interference Registry is something that goes back to Justin Trudeau. We knew that there was other governments, China included, that were interfering in our elections, trying to influence the outcome, trying to get a government that they want to work with, not a government who may not necessarily be as friendly to them. There was an interference problem in Canada. We had a whole inquiry about this. We were supposed to create a foreign agent registry. In other words, if someone wants to lobby on behalf of another government, they have to be registered as a foreign agent, and meetings with our politicians are supposed to be documented. At least we're supposed to know that the meetings took place. It's been years, and we still don't have that foreign interference registry. Let me play you this question. It's 1 minute long from Michael Chong yesterday in the House of Commons.
Member for Wellington, Halton Hills North.
Mr. Speaker, Beijing's foreign interference is the biggest threat to the security of Canada. That's what the Prime Minister told Canadians last spring. Less than a year later, the Prime Minister has entered into a so-called strategic partnership with Beijing, yet we still have no foreign influence transparency registry. When the bill was being debated, the government said it hoped to have the registry up and running in 12 months ahead of a federal election. 19 months and one election later, and still no registry. Another election could pass without the protection of a registry.
One wonders if the government delayed the registry till now to avoid offending Beijing's leadership. And for the same reason, Liberal MPs were told recently to cut their trip short to Taiwan. Canadians deserve a government that treats foreign interference seriously as a threat to our national security. The government needs to implement the Foreign Influence Transparency Registry now. Hear, hear.
I will correct myself. I did say Foreign Interference Registry. It's actually the Foreign Influence Registry, but interference and influence could be used basically interchangeably. I don't want to spend too much time on Doug Ford. I'm really disappointed in that guy, but I am going to play just two answers that he gave yesterday when he was doing a news conference with the Premier of New Brunswick, Susan Holt, yesterday in Ottawa. A couple interesting ones. Here's some things to think about. Premier Ford.
Yasmin Mizzi avec Radio-Canada. My question is for Premier Ford. I would like to know, what did Prime Minister Carney tell you to convince you that the deal with China would not hurt Ontario's auto industry, and what assurances did he give you?
Well, I think everyone knows where I stand. I was very clear with the Prime Minister, and I met with Minister Jolie. I look forward to sitting down and putting a strong auto strategy together and supporting our domestic auto manufacturers in Ontario. That's what we need to do. Focus on supporting them. It's very competitive out there. We have the best auto makers anywhere in the world in Ontario, and we need to support them.
Well, you guys might want to get on that because we're losing a lot of jobs. I mean, 1,200 people at GM in Oshawa tomorrow are going to be unemployed. How much time do they plan to take to develop this auto strategy, and what's that really going to do? I'd like to think it's going to protect jobs, but Protect Ontario does not seem to be going very well so far. Not when you look at the record numbers of jobs being lost and how much money the government has to pump into private companies just to try and keep them afloat. One more for the Premier.
Ian Bailey from the Globe and Mail. A question for Premier Ford, although Premier Holt you may want to weigh in as well. Premier Ford, you were at odds with the Prime Minister over tariffs and EVs in China. You managed to reach an accommodation. Today, the Prime Minister has taken the unusual step of convening a meeting with Premier Eby and Premier Smith, who are clearly at odds over pipelines. Do you think he can bring these two together to some kind of agreement? And do you think it's harmful for the division between these two provinces, these two leaders on this subject?
Well, first of all, great question. And I've said many times before, we're a big family, and within a family, there's going to be disagreements. But make no mistake about it, and I know Premier Holt feels the same way with all the other premiers. When we come out of a room, we're united. But make no mistake about it, there's different things that we may agree or disagree. We have a massive country. What may be good for New Brunswick may not be good for BC, that may not be good for Alberta or Ontario. Vice versa, but we've showed a united front, and it doesn't matter what political stripe the premiers come from. We have a very, very close relationship with each other, and we work together and we work things out. So I'm feeling confident of the Prime Minister. He can work out maybe some disagreements out on the West Coast. But we're all working, from the same song sheet with a couple different tweaks depending on what region you come from in Canada.
Yeah, I mean, hey, it's a great idea, right? It sounds nice when he comes out and says we're all on the same page. And, when we're a family, sometimes there's disagreements, but these are fundamental disagreements. Alberta is adamant they need this pipeline built, and BC is adamant they don't want this pipeline going through British Columbia. Unfortunately, it has to go through British Columbia to reach the coast, or we have to go south and go through America, and then we're back into the situation we're in now. The Premier compromised Ontario's auto sector so that Saskatchewan farmers could get some relief on canola tariffs. I just don't understand why certain provinces are going to get their way and other provinces aren't, but they're all expected to just shut up and take it because we're all Team Canada. I agree wholeheartedly with the Team Canada approach, but it's got to be balanced and it's got to be fair, and things have got to be done with the national interest in mind. Did we really need to allow 50,000 Chinese spy cars? That's Doug Ford's term, not mine. Did we really need to allow 50,000 spy cars into our auto market to get relief on canola tariffs? Or was there something else we could have done? Does BC really have a valid argument other than environmental ideology? about the pipeline not going through their province? If it's good for Canada, it's just plain got to get done. And you know, I mean, like I said, I admire the spirit. Hey, we're all on one page. Doesn't matter what party we're from. We're all working together. But so far, the evidence is all very, very contrary. I don't see how this Team Canada approach, where one province is blocking another province's prosperity, I don't see how that gets us any further ahead, particularly when this group of premiers still has not found a way to tear down all of the inter-provincial trade barriers. It's a big problem as far as I'm concerned, and it's something that's got to be addressed. Friends, I've still got lots more audio here that I could play for you. I don't really have time to do that, though, because I try and keep these episodes to about this length and make it listenable. If you want to hear more content just like this, though, if you missed any episodes this week, by all means, go back and give it a listen. Tomorrow, I'm fully expecting there's going to be things to talk about, especially after all the premiers meet with the Prime Minister. I'm also aware that this weekend is the Conservative Convention in Calgary. Hey, if you're going to that, have yourself a great time. I just want to point out that there's an obvious trap there at that Conservative convention, and Conservatives need to be aware that there's going to be some in the Alberta sovereignty movement who are going to try and hijack parts of that convention, and I really don't think people should take the bait. I really think this should be a respectful, civil convention where you talk about conservative values, and I say you, not we, because I'm not going. I really don't have a whole lot of interest in going and hobnobbing with the influencers and all these other people that are really just looking for a moment on social media. It's not for me. I would much rather stay here and do what I'm doing right now. But that's not a shot at them. If they want to go, by all means, have yourself a great time. The leadership review for Pierre Poilievre is going to be taking place tomorrow. Good. I hope that goes really well. I hope Pierre gets a great number because I think that he's probably the right guy. What tells me Pierre is the right guy to lead the Conservative Party is the fact that the Liberals are trying everything they can to get rid of Pierre Poilievre. If he wasn't a threat, they wouldn't want to get rid of him. But he is a threat. They know that. They see that in the polls. Not the polls that they publish on social media and in the newspapers, the actual polls that they get internally. Pierre's doing just fine. And if we do have an election, I'm sure that he will likely be the Conservative leader. And he just needs to get a good number tomorrow, Friday, in Calgary. So I'll try and touch on that tomorrow as well. Again, if you're going to the convention, have yourself a great time. Say hi to everybody. Have a drink for me. And try and make it a good, productive weekend where you don't get caught up in the day-to-day. We talk about the future of Canada. It doesn't need to get ugly. It doesn't need to be divisive. I hope it's a good convention. I hope some good, sound, conservative values get discussed and that it's not all about trade. There's other issues we need to talk about. Let's not lose focus of the fact that we still have a massive crime problem in Canada. We still have a massive immigration problem in Canada. And not the least of which, we've got a massive affordability crisis in Canada right now where the middle class is not getting ahead. Some of those numbers that I played earlier from that son of a bitch, Tiff Macklem at the Bank of Canada, pretty sobering. Those job losses that I mentioned right off the start of this pod, my God, every one of those job losses is a person and is a family that's affected, that might not be able to put food on the table once their paycheck runs out, because the EI certainly is not as much as the paychecks were. I'm really worried about people, guys, and I'm going to keep talking about this sort of stuff because I think it's important. I did say, though, that I had a traffic story that I wanted to fit into this episode, and I'm going to do that before I go. The latest numbers on traffic for 2025 are out. Do you remember back in the day, before we all had these integrated dashboards, you likely had an external GPS unit suction cupped to your windshield, and they divided Canada and the USA into two camps. You were either Team Garmin or you were Team TomTom. Well, the TomTom company is still around, even though I don't see many of their GPSs out there anymore, and they're still crunching the numbers on traffic. They create a traffic index every single year. This is interesting. The worst city in Canada for traffic. Go ahead and take a guess. I'm going to give you 3 seconds on the clock. Worst city in Canada for traffic. Go. If you said Vancouver, you are absolutely right. Vancouver has the worst traffic in the country, worse than Toronto. An interesting note, though, about that Toronto traffic, the GTA traffic. Commuters spent 100 hours last year sitting in gridlock. 100 hours, 4 days sitting in traffic. That is absolutely wild. And, it's a total testament for why we need better transit. It is all the proof you need that we need to start thinking about other options, because what we're doing right now is simply not working. And we can't have people spending 100 hours a year sitting in traffic. By the way, Vancouver, like I said, the worst in Canada, the worst in North America, Mexico City. Second worst in North America, Guadalajara. The top 2 worst cities are in Mexico. Number 3 on the list, Los Angeles. I don't think that's really a surprise. I did find it interesting, though, that Honolulu, Hawaii is in the top 5 for worst traffic in America. I'm not exactly sure why. It doesn't seem like that should be an issue. I don't know why anyone in paradise is in a hurry to go anywhere, but clearly you're not if traffic is that bad. New York was number 9 on the list. So we've got a traffic problem here, everybody. And if you're listening to this sitting in traffic, that's almost a little bit of irony. Friends, tomorrow's the listener DMs episode. I've got a lot of them in already on some great topics that I'm going to try and cover tomorrow. If you want to add to the list, all I ask is that you keep it brief. Try and keep it concise, because Anna's not going to be here tomorrow. It's just me, and I can fit more questions in if you keep the premise of your question brief, or your comment, by the way, because I'm also open to comments. If you want to agree with me, disagree with me, call me out, offer some praise, I'm open to anything. I will have your DMs tomorrow in a brand new edition of Scott Fox After 9. Have a good one. I'll see you in less than 24 hours. And as always, Pat James and The Whole Truth takes us out. Hey now.